So you are getting ready to build a budget-minded VR PC and need to find a video card that doesn't break the bank, yet is going to work with you in virtual reality. Maybe you just bought a new Rift S or a Vive and need to know how much GPU do you really need and how much is it going to cost. It doesn't help that there is such a broad range of video cards on the market, ranging from sub $200 to well over $1,000. Well, today let's take a look at this $129 GPU from AMD, specifically the PowerColor Redragon RX 570. Is this really enough GPU for virtual reality? Well, let's find out. This is PowerColor's RX 570 labeled the Redragon. This 4GB model uses DDR5 memory and has 2048 stream processors. Stock, this has a boost clock that hits 1250 MHz with a 1750 MHz memory clock. We were able to push this easily to a 1450 MHz clock speed and 2000 MHz on the memory without seeing any significant heat increase or without any fine tuning. I think it's a safe bet that this overclock is obtainable for most people and with some possible headroom left over for additional performance. On the back of the card, it has 3 display ports, 1 HDMI, and 1 DVI output. It's listed on Newegg and Amazon for $129, and I do have a link listed down in the description below if you want to check it out and are considering picking up one of these. So with the specs out of the way, let's jump to the next step. Let's run some benchmarks, get some baseline figures, and see how that overclock is going to perform. We will be benchmarking with UL's VRmark VR benchmarking suite. We will run each of VRmark's tests 3 times and then determine the average score for each test. We will run through all of the testing on stock clock speeds and then turn around and do them all overclocked. VRmark has 3 distinct benchmarks, and they are the Orange Room, Cyan Room, and the Blue Room. The Orange Room is the most basic of the 3 and tests based on the Oculus Rift and HTC Vive's recommended system specifications. The Cyan Room utilizes DirectX 12 and showcases larger, more complex scenes utilizing the built-in feature sets from DirectX 12. Last is the Blue Room, and is the most demanding benchmark of the 3. Using higher resolutions along with volumetric lighting effects, this benchmark provides insight to just how future-proof your hardware is as we move into the next generation of VR head-mounted displays with their higher resolutions and higher refresh rates. Let's get this VR benchmark party started. In the Orange Room, on the stock settings, we saw a high score of 6,354. Overclocked, we had a high of 7,142. Our overall average scores were 6,365 and 7,120, respectively. That is an 11% difference based on our average scores, and that's a nice bump in performance and well worth the effort of overclocking. Both scores are well above the minimum scores for both the Oculus Rift and VRmark's own performance guidelines. In the Cyan Room, on stock speeds, we hit a high score of 4,134. Overclocked, we were able to hit 4,651. Our average overall scores were 4,131 and 4,649. And once again, we see an 11% jump in performance while overclocked. And once again, we maintain a higher score than the minimum VRmark scores. In the final and most taxing benchmark, the Blue Room, we see the factory clock scores dip below VRmark's VR Ready score, although still above the Rift minimum at 1047. Once overclocked, we squeaked back above both VR minimum scores, hitting a high of 1187. Overall, our average scores were 1047 and 1185. These tests demonstrate you can expect reasonable base performance from this card, but is going to disappoint on next-gen hardware and experiences that require more than just the minimum hardware specs. Still, for $129, this will allow you to get by for most optimized experiences. Next, aside from these benchmarks, we also strapped into our Oculus Rift and did some in-game subjective testing just to ensure it played well across a range of VR titles. We spent time in Dead and Buried 2, Robo Recall, Beat Saber, Vader Immortal, and others. We didn't have any issues at all with these titles in both the stock and overclocked configurations. So I think it is fair to say the RX 570 is a great entry-level VR capable GPU. If you are willing to spend a little time tweaking on it and really maximizing the overclock, you can squeeze NVIDIA 1060 level VR performance out of it at a considerable discount. While we saw in our VRmark testing, this GPU is not going to hold up with the next level VR headsets like the Valve Index and HP Reverb, it is also certain that in unoptimized VR experiences or experiences that are not beholden to any minimum spec, you may experience low frame rates and stuttering. But this is going to get you by if you intend to use a Vive or Rift S and just understand the GPU's limitations. Just know eventually you're gonna need to step up to a new, higher priced graphics card. But it's still hard to deny that this GPU for $129 offers a great value. Well, that's it for today's video. I hope you found these results helpful or at least interesting. If you did, hit that like button and subscribe so you don't miss any of our future VR benchmarking or any of our VR news and reviews. Most importantly, don't forget to enjoy that 360 life.